Hi, everybody, and welcome to Eye on the Eagles, your all-access pass to all things Avila Athletics. It's our first show in a little while. Missed the last couple of Wednesdays due to weather and holidays and other such, but we are back. Happy to have you with us. We're live from Tanner's at Redbridge. I'm Sports Information Director Tim Hackett. Our first guest today, head baseball coach Matt Carpenter. Welcome to the show, Carp.
Good to see you, Tim. Thanks for having me.
Welcome home. I know it's been a busy last couple of days for you. We're filming this right before noon on Monday, and you guys got back in town about less than 10 hours ago as we talk live.
We did, fresh off the bus.
So thank you for being here with us.
Absolutely.
First of all. I know it was always a busy time, and this is really your biggest trip of the year in terms of distance. So now you've got one weekend of action in the books. How are you feeling about Avila baseball so far?
Feel all right. Obviously, the results this weekend weren't what we were hoping for. Wanted to get out of there with a win or two. Wasn't in the cards. But definitely saw some stuff to build on, and I know that's what everybody's supposed to say after they go 0-4 on the weekend. But I say that sincerely, as there really was some stuff to build off of. We had a lot of guys that kind of cut down on their strikeouts over what they did last year. We were able to get on base a lot. We just weren't quite able to capitalize on those opportunities, which I guess is better than not having any opportunities. At least we know we're capable of getting on base, so now we know what we have to work on. So. I feel good with the lack of being able to be outside the first couple weeks. That's no excuse or anything for not being able to get a W down there, but it did make it a little bit harder to evaluate. So I felt like we were a little bit behind the eight ball and maybe necessarily putting the right guys in the right spots at the right times. So hopefully we learned a little bit about that this weekend too. And with 34 new guys on the roster, it was their first time going out and playing somebody besides themselves. So hopefully they learned a little something about playing together as well. And for a lot of them, a little something about playing for us as a coaching staff. So there's always, no matter how good or badly things go, there's always things that you can learn from it. I think the positive for us is we know what we need to work on coming out of it. So we'll take that as a positive and see what we can do with it in practice this week.
There's so much to unpack this time of year because you just finished up your first weekend of games. We wanted to have you on for a kind of a preseason show. It's your first time with us here this calendar year. So there's so much to discuss, so much to unpack about as we get ready to really get this season started. We heard from just about every coach at KCAC Baseball Media Day 2 weeks ago at this point in our conference how difficult it has been to get outside to practice for a sport that is played outdoors typically. So how does that directly actually translate for a team? In other words, how important is it to actually get onto a real baseball field rather than hitting or pitching inside?
It's really important in some aspects of the game and probably not as important in other aspects. For instance, we got a lot of swings in. We got as many swings in last week as we would have gotten in otherwise. But they were all indoor, and really from an offensive standpoint, the biggest difference is when you're facing a live pitcher, which we tried to do inside. It still is a little bit different inside than it is outside, but really the volume of swings and stuff was good. The infield, there's a little bit of a disadvantage to being inside, but you can still get a lot of similar drill work indoors as what you can outdoor. Where it really comes into play, honestly, Tim, is the outfield. You can't hit fly balls in a building. And I do think we saw that this weekend. We struggled a little more defensively in the outfield than we did in the infield. And honestly, our hitting, our timing was okay, maybe a little better than I thought it was going to be. And our awareness of the strike zone was actually pretty good. Like I said, we didn't capitalize on opportunities, but really, as I look through, and pitchers can get a lot of good work inside. Okay. Really, as I look through, like it's never as good as being outside. But I would say, from a pitching and a hitting standpoint, you're looking at about 70-80% of the effectiveness of being outdoor. But when it comes to outfield, you're more like 25%. So that's where the big difference really comes in. So hopefully, weather looks like it's going to cooperate this week, and just lots and lots of fly ball reps for those outfielders. I think we'll be pretty well caught up by then.
One of my favorite things about this sport, and I'm no coach or manager, but one of my favorite things is figuring out, trying to discern how a coach might set their lineup based on who their personnel is, and it was impossible for me to figure that out going into this weekend at Sagu because there are so many new guys, like you've said.
Right.
So what was that like for you as the head coach, setting that first lineup and then knowing, all right, I've got 3 more games after this, knowing that the weekend schedule was different than you initially anticipated, but regardless, I've got 3 other games after this. You worked a lot of different guys into that lineup. The Game 1 lineup, starting 9, was not really close to the Game 4 in a lot of ways. So what was all of those moving pieces like?
Honestly, it was kind of fun. Like, if we had won, it would have been more fun.
Fair enough.
But I have this like little bit of like, it's almost like I don't mean this in like a non-humanizing way to my players because I obviously love them, but it's like we have a whole lot of new toys.
Yeah.
And we want to see what we can do with them. And I just kind of all my years of coaching, I know whatever lineup we run out there, Game 1 is not going to be the lineup that we end up being, and I've kind of come to peace with that. So I don't really stress myself out too much about how we're going to line it up. Excuse me, the first couple times. But you're right. A lot of guys that most of what we know about them is what we've seen on paper and in video and stuff, and so trying to put that together in the right way. I think we just kind of took a approach to it of, hey, this is what we're going to try first, but this is probably not going to be the finished product. And trying to balance out a little bit, maybe like the guys that maybe their offense is the strength of their game, guys that are the defense is the strength of their game, trying to balance that a little bit so we're not too heavy defense and lacking offense in a game and not too heavy offensively and lacking defensively in another game. But that stuff, I kind of look at last weekend and this coming weekend similar to a big league spring training. We definitely, there's more of a focus on winning than there is in a big league spring training for sure, but trying to figure out how the pieces work and giving guys opportunities to prove themselves still. So it's that part of it is really exciting. Like I said, it's a lot more fun if you win when you're doing it. But that part was actually pretty exciting to me.
What did you learn about some of those guys? Because about roughly half of the lineup, maybe a third, were guys that we've seen a lot over the last 2 or 3 years, but just about everybody else in any given one of the 4 games this weekend were new to us, to fans, and to me watching. So they're not new to you. You've been hanging with them for the last couple of months, but you get to see them in a lineup in game action against a quote-unquote real pitcher for the first time. So what did you get to learn about some of these guys?
One thing that you learn is like, okay, how is this guy gonna face firm velocity? How does this guy? What are his instincts on the bases? And we learned a couple things about some of our guys there. Like, okay, this guy looks to me like maybe this matchup is not going to be a good matchup for him moving forward, but this is the kind of matchup we need to get him in. And with as many guys as we have this year, we're going to try to play a little bit more matchup baseball than we have in the past. So kind of getting that feel for like, hey, he looks like he's going to struggle with this, but he looks like he's going to do well with this. We did learn a little bit about that. And like you always have, like, you can stand guys up and run them in a straight line and they could be really fast, but if they don't have that instinct on the bases. So we learned, a couple guys that maybe aren't as fast as some other guys, have a little bit extra instinct gene, and they might be better base runners for us than we thought. The biggest positive that I took away from an offensive standpoint as far as what we learned is we got a freshman catcher, Rustin Traxler, and he's pretty well ready to be a college baseball player right now. And that's big for us to create depth at that position.
No doubt.
And he's a good solid hitter. Didn't look overmatched at all. So that was a real positive. And I wasn't sure, as many young guys as we have, I kind of know that throughout the course of the season that light switch is going to come on for each of them at different times. And just being able to see that we had a guy already that's ready to go, that was a big positive that we learned this weekend.
Any other guys stand out to you like that?
Not so much amongst the young guys, but Gio Armas, who threw yesterday in Game 4, threw an absolutely great game, a game that we need to win. He's a guy that you watch him throw his bullpens, and he just spots up all day long. And he did the same thing in a game, and the same demeanor on the mound. So I think one thing we learned there is, here's a guy who shows it indoors and that can also show it outdoors. And we ran some freshmen out there on the mound on Game 1, Julio Perez, Austin Rogers. They both got in the game, and the moment was not too big for them. They were both Texas guys, so they're both down close to home. I know Julio, probably half the people in attendance on Saturday night were either friends or family of Julio, and he went out and got the job done.
That's
so
awesome.
we've got some guys that can do this, that can do this for the long term. So that's a real positive that we took out of it. One of the things I guess the downsides would be, like I mentioned earlier, kind of struggled to capitalize, and that was kind of a theme for us last year that we're going to have to address. That'll be the big focus this week. So that's something that we're going to have to take a look at as well.
You just hinted at a couple of the pitchers, and one of the things that you mentioned in our conversation last week with some of our broadcasters, Max Williams and Jackson Nelms, which will air on our YouTube channel here in a couple of days later on this week ahead of Avila's series against Dort later on this week. But one of the things you talked about with them, so not to spoil their thunder too much, but I really liked it, so I wanted to talk with you a little bit about it more live, if you will. Kind of your approach for a series rather than, all right, we need to get through 3 games or 4 games as it might be during a conference series over the course of the week. You put it to us last week as we need to get 34 outs. So can you explain to us what that philosophy is like, how that manifested, and what that will how that developed, I should say, and how that will manifest for you guys going over the course of this season?
Yeah, so typically, like most baseball teams are put together, you got your starter, you're hoping that he goes 5, 7, 8 innings on a good day, and then you've got your 1-inning guys that come in and close the game out. And that's, just kind of looking at the pieces that we have, I feel like we have a lot of solid pitchers on our team. We have some depth there when it comes to quality arms that we haven't had in the past. We've had some really good arms in the past, but not this volume of them. And, throughout baseball at any level, from our level up to the D1 level, the big league level, a pitcher's effectiveness is typically going to go down each time through the lineup. And so our thought was, as much depth as we have, we really don't have – I thought Cash and Strands and Gio both showed this week an ability to maybe go out and shut another team down, but we don't really have – we don't have a lot of 90-plus arms or anything like that where you're thinking, hey, any day is a possible complete game shutout. But we do have a lot of guys that can get through the lineup once to twice and be really effective. And so kind of our philosophy was, hey, let's look at a week and say in a conference week we're going to have 34 innings. We have the guys that can get 34 outs. And so let's say, we're going to try to get 12 out of our starters. And then this guy is a guy that I think can get us 6. This guy is a guy that I think can get us 3 on Saturday and maybe come back and get us 3 on Sunday. And just kind of trying to put all the pieces together to effectively go out and get 34 outs every single week, rather than just trying to do it in the traditional sense. So, and that seemed to kind of, I wouldn't say it worked for us this weekend, but I think we still like that approach after this weekend. One of the tricky things with these non-conference tournaments is, rather than being a 9 and a 9 and a 7 and then a 9 later on in the middle of the week, these are 4 7s. So essentially we're 6 innings lighter.
Sure.
Which, I mean, I guess when you have a 12-hour bus ride isn't bad, but it also meant that was 6 fewer innings that we had opportunities to get looks at guys. So we'll still play with it for the first few weeks, but I think that definitely has to be our approach. And one of the things, I mean, and anybody that follows us this year will probably see countless times where I will not do this, but even though I say I'm going to, there's something to be said, I think, for looking at a guy, seeing what you think he's capable of doing and doing well, giving him that job to do, letting him go out and do it, and get him out of there. There's a tendency in baseball to leave a guy out there until he starts to struggle. And so kind of our thought was, with what we have, maybe the right thing to do is say, hey, we need 12 outs. Hey, we need 6 outs. If you go out there and you do that really well, we're going to, pound your fist and say good job and pass it on to the next guy to do his job. So
this is a conversation that I have had with a number of the assistant coaches, especially on the pitching side, even into last semester, not knowing any of what you just really outlined to us at that point. But this is kind of my philosophy for how the game, how the sport is going over the course of how it's going in the near future, in my opinion.
I think so.
But certainly in the not too distant future. I love pitching personally. That's my favorite part of the game, and I love starting pitchers. Like you said, a lot of teams, the best teams are built around having great starting pitching. But you see it in Major League Baseball. Once you get into the World Series and deep into the playoffs, the way that pitchers are used is fundamentally completely different than they're used in a series in July, which I think, A, is weird, but B, makes sense because you're going with whoever is the most effective, whoever you think is the most capable of getting you those outs, maybe that one out at that one specific exact time. So whoever starts, maybe they come in the third inning in a game like that. It's just a complete paradigm shift, and I think that might be what we see the sport go to at all levels, in where you have fewer starters and more teams that go 3 guys to get you 3 innings each, rather than a guy that gives you 7, 1, and 1, for example. You need 9 innings. We're going to have 3 guys that gives you 3, or some breakdown like that, right? So not really even knowing that was who we had necessarily, just knowing that we were going into this season with so many different pitchers and fewer guys that were established starters for your team compared to last season where we had multiple returners. I wondered if that might be kind of your approach, at least to start, but it seems like that might actually be a good approach just because of the number of guys that you have. You need to fill a certain number of innings. Let's mathematically, meet it out somehow, and here's how we're going to attack it, and let's see how effective everybody can be.
Yep. And I will say I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
It's something. It's a funny thing though. This is something I advocated for when I was an assistant coach here, and I remember talking to Coach Cronk about it, and him being like, "Yeah, that sounds good." He's like, "You're going to have to remind me that we want to do that, because as the head coach, when something's going well, you're kind of like, hey, let's get a little more." And it is funny to me to see the shift, because now that I'm on this side of it, now I know that temptation to keep riding it. So. It's just it's ingrained in baseball, guys, right? And I mean, and there's a difference. I mean, if a guy goes out and he's through 4 innings and he's thrown 35 pitches and he has 5 Ks, you're not gonna rock that boat.
Sure.
But knowing that right moment, I just really feel there's a value in telling a guy what his job is and letting him do his job, and not say, hey, you've done your job, now I'm going to leave you out here until you start to fail.
It's such a hard balance to strike. I imagine I'm no head coach, but we've seen it in Major League Baseball, especially with my favorite professional team, and now also with your favorite professional team as well over the last year or so with new management, that is an approach. I'm talking openers, I'm talking spot starters, I'm talking guys that are going out there as starting pitchers that know they're only going to, in theory, to be out there for 2 or 3 innings. So it's, we call it the Johnny Holstaff around here, right? Because you know that it's going to be that type of approach. But my point is that it's getting increasingly more common at other levels. And again, as a starting pitcher at heart, I was a terrible pitcher, but it pains me a little bit, but I love it from a strategy standpoint, because hopefully that keeps guys healthy. Hopefully that helps people's effectiveness, and I think it's very interesting because you never know who's coming in next, and you got to hope that they're as good or better as the guy before.
Yep. If we're on here next year and I'm telling you that we're trying to average 7 innings a game out of our starters, we'll know it didn't work. But I think it's the right approach for us right now, and I agree with you. It's becoming more prevalent all throughout the game.
But maybe that means that those guys can grow into that, because I think the biggest difference, and this is an obvious comment, but since you have so many new pitchers this year, the start of last season we had so many established returning starters, maybe is part of the goal to develop some of those guys into guys that can be 5-6 innings arms by the end of this season, and then once we get into the meat of next season as well. Is that kind of the development process for an arm?
I mean, it'd be great if it plays out that way. But if it doesn't and this works, I'm good with this model as well. Cool. So,
another non-conference series coming up for you guys. Our first home series of the season this weekend, slated for Friday and Saturday here at the Z in Kansas City, if all goes well, against Dordt. It's a team we've seen quite a bit over the last couple of years. I know it's very early on, and you guys just got home 10 hours ago, but what can you tell us, at least from your perspective, about what you're looking forward to for this first series at home?
So Dordt is coached by Nathan Bacon, who was an Avila grad. Okay. Played back here in 2012, my first year as an assistant coach here on one of our better teams. Nathan grew up in this area, went to Summit Christian High School. Like I said, Avila graduate. His wife went to Avila, so I know they'll be fired up and ready to come in. You never want to ruin a former player's weekend, but that's the goal. So yeah, I mean, they'll come in. They were just a touch under 500 last year. A little bit better record than us last year. I think they're about 20-26. We were 18-32. So I anticipate some good baseball. I know from some of the guys that they recruited and signed, he and I were talking to a lot of the same guys. So I expect with those similar records and us kind of pursuing the same guys out on the recruiting trail. I look for good, solid baseball, competitive baseball games. Want as many wins as we can get, but good, solid baseball. Like I said on last week with Jackson and Max, the more times we can be competitive, the more times we're going to win. And so that's kind of the goal this weekend. I would expect this is a good non-conference matchup. I think I think there's value in competitive games, and that's what I expect to see this weekend. And with Nathan having the familiarity with being here, I think he'll really come in fired up. I imagine his guys will kind of follow his lead on that. So we'll see what we can do.
I've actually had the chance to talk with a couple of the guys already because, like I said, you guys got back super early Monday. We're filming this right around noon on Monday. And, just hearing from some of the guys that, the team went 0-4 in your first weekend series of the year, but saw a lot of good, both offensively and pitching-wise, across the board. But those guys, the guys that I talked to, and I talked about a half dozen just today already, they said that they're motivated to get back out there. So look,
good.
I'm sure that's something that does your heart good because I feel like it's very early on. And you've got a 50-game season, and as you know better than me, this sport has a long season, a lot of ups and downs. So it would be somewhat easy to just kind of sit like, okay, we didn't start the way that we want, just kind of hang our heads about it. But at least what they were telling me, some of the guys that I was with today, they're ready to get back out there in this weekend and see if they can turn that thing around.
Well, that's good, Tim. I haven't heard from any of them. They must like you better than they like me.
I highly doubt that that's the case.
That's good to hear.
They like Keaton is what it was, so they wanted to come in and talk to him.
Who doesn't like Keaton?
Everybody likes Keaton.
So.
He's not watching this right now. So that is our top assistant, my top assistant, Keaton Ashby, our chief creative officer, assistant pitching coach, for in case anybody's trying to correct the record here. He was at bowling with me all day Sunday, so I was hoping to maybe give him some time off. But, hey, we're all here, so – What's he doing?
That's right.
Anyway, those guys seemed like they were excited to get back out there, get back in the box, get back on the mound, and I can speak secondhand from covering baseball that can be a hard thing to achieve sometimes, and maybe that's a good sign very early on to get back out there.
Yeah, weekend. That's great. I love hearing that.
Well, we will have the chance to see them back out there this weekend, Friday and Saturday here at the Z, first home baseball series of the season. Both days scheduled to start at noon, as I recall.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, sir.
So two seven-inning games both days. So same format as this past weekend. That's how all these non-conference series are going to go. We'll have coverage of all of those for you live on the Avila Sports Network, right where you're watching this live, and, of course, all of the coverage on the social media channels and AvilaAthletics.com. That is Friday at noon, and then again, Saturday at noon, your first opportunity to see our Avila baseball team at home here in 2024. That is head baseball coach Matt Carpenter. You're watching Eye on the Eagles. We'll be right back with head coach Paul Wolf right after this. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Eye on the Eagles, your all-access pass to all things Avila Athletics. I'm Sports Information Director Tim Hackett, now joined by head bowling coach Paul Wolf. Welcome to the show, Coach.
Thanks, Tim.
And congratulations on getting through your first home event of the season. I know that it is a lot, and that is going to be the focus of our conversation today. The second annual Eagle Invitational is in the books. Congratulations, first of all, on achieving that. How do you feel it went?
I think it went really well. You know, last year was our first year, and we figured out what to do and what not to do. And we came back this year, and I thought it ran a little bit smoother. You know, we got a lot of compliments from a lot of teams, a lot of parents about how well the tournament was run and how efficiently it was run, and that's our goal. You know, the unfortunate part about this tournament, and fortunate or unfortunate, is that I don't get to coach as much as I would like. I'm doing a lot of the administrative work, so I'm doing a lot of running around, and I rely on my assistants and my manager, and so I don't get to give the teams as much attention. I'm worried about all the teams, not just mine. So it's a lot to undertake for it, but it's one weekend, and we really enjoy hosting it.
Is it fair to say that this is now year 3 of the Avila bowling program? You only have so many events per year. Not every team, especially not a program as young as yours, gets to host an event all the time, and certainly not one that you have now done 2 years in a row. It was kind of, I thought, a special, even more special last season to have your first home event in year 2 of the program, but now you're turning this into an annual thing. And again, not every school, not every program gets to be the host of an event like this. So I think that's pretty significant for you.
Well, I think, we're very fortunate in that, our home center is Aaron's Family Fun Center in Belton. It's a 32 lane. Well, actually, it's a 38 lane, but 32 really for tournaments. And they were very much up for it. And it's a beautiful bowling center. And, we're very fortunate to be able to use that. There's a lot of places, a lot of schools that have much smaller bowling centers, and they just can't host it. They just don't have the room. So yeah, we're very fortunate to do it. And when I started here, Sean Sumi approached me and said, what are our chances of hosting a tournament? I said, well, we can get that done. I don't know how great it's going to be, but we can get it done. And we picked a weekend, and unfortunately, we were going up against another tournament the first year. Well, that tournament, we did so well our first year with entries that tournament actually folded, and they started coming to us.
Wow.
So, I see it. We're going to keep that tournament for as long as we can, and a lot of schools like coming to it because you're coming out of the first semester. It's usually the first or second tournament of the second semester, and it gives you a chance to get going before you hit all these tier ones, and get going into postseason. So everybody's trying to find tournaments for second semester. We're kind of centrally located, easy to get to. We're in a bigger city. There's hotels. It's it just works out well for everybody. The only thing that ever holds us back, and this year we were very fortunate, but last year it was freezing cold.
Sure.
You just have to watch the weather. But other than that, that's the only thing that really holds us back.
What goes into putting on an event like this? That is such a general question, but I guess the specific way to start is, how soon do you start planning for this event that you just had this weekend, about 12 months after the first one, and you had another home event in the mix in between that as well? So how soon do you start planning for all of this? How soon do teams start signing up? When do the final preparations come in? What is it like putting all this stuff together?
I start getting interest in it before it actually hits the calendar to pick tournaments. So I usually get interest in it usually around June from schools, and then when I put it up on the USBC calendar, you can't put anything up until I think August 1st. And when you put it up on the USBC calendar, that's when they start hitting you up. And this year I had a waiting list for the tournament. Next year I think we're going to do things maybe a little different, maybe move varsity men into one center and varsity women into another center now that Summit Lanes and Lee Summit has kind of signed on with us. They're only 24 lanes, so we kind of have to limit it. We had the JV over there this year. So, there's just things that Mike Soroka and I have to work out and kind of dive into and see what we want to do. I don't want it to get too big. It's a lot of work, and during the tournament and keeping everybody happy and doing all the computer work and getting everything sent off to the proper places after everything's done. It turns into a lot of work, and we have a lot of people that help us out. But we'll just see what happens with it. I don't see us not hosting that tournament, ever. It's always going to be on our schedule.
That's awesome.
I want to have a home event. For as long as I'm here, I want to have a home event every year. The kids don't have a chance to have a home event. And I think that's really important. I think it's important for them. I think it's important for their parents to come out and watch. They don't have to travel all weekend. I just think, and it's important for Avila.
I couldn't agree more, and that's why I have loved being even just a small part of the home events that we have had, because I was talking to a number of the athletes over the course of the last couple of days, is that, I get to tune in and watch you guys on Facebook all the time, but unlike, if you let me say it like this, unlike our other sports who I get to see at home roughly half the year, this is pretty much our only chance as fans and as, your teammates at the school to be able to see these athletes and to see you guys put in the work that you do at a home event. Again, it's we get to watch every weekend, which is awesome, and you guys do an incredible job of having that live coverage. But it is cool to be able to be in that space with you guys and cheer the athletes on. That's what I was saying, is that I don't usually this is just me personally, because if we're at a home event, I'm typically at the table at basketball or in the press box at football and soccer or so on. I'm not cheering for the athletes. I'm working, doing various gigs. Once I got the camera set up and just kind of press play and hope for the best this weekend. So I was cheering for the athletes once we got to go, and that's cool for me because who doesn't do anything, right? But I get to actually support them in a different way, and that's fun to be a part of something like that and actually get to see them out there and do it.
Well, yeah, and all of them noticed who was there. As much as I didn't want them to turn around and look and see what was going on, but they all noticed who was there. There was a lot of my coworkers, other coaches, their sister Jean made an appearance. Sean was there most of the day. It's great to get that kind of support, and and even if it's only once a year, it's well worth it, and our teams really appreciate it.
Some of the things that we've heard from other coaches, even on this show over the course of the year, is how different it is to be a coach for a road event versus a home event versus for some of them for a neutral event. And it's something that I don't really consider because I do next to nothing for road events, but just about everything that I do is for home events in my job. But I don't really consider how much more might go into your job, your workflow, what you might have to do over the course of the day, or for your case over the course of the week to get ready for a home event. And so what you hinted at this a little bit already, but what is it like to run this event on top of having to do what you would normally do for any given road event, such as the one that we talked with you about the last time we had you on the show in Las Vegas, where you've got to get them there, you got to travel, you got to make sure everybody's there. But in theory, once you actually get into the center for the day, all you have to do is coach and manage. But now you've got a little bit more on your plates.
Yeah, it's a lot more administrative work, and it takes up a lot more time. Like yesterday, it got done with everything. Championship matches were over about 2:30, 3 o'clock. Well, I didn't get home until about 4:30, almost 5. Just doing, sending stuff off to Arlington because they need all the results to post and keep stats for and do the rankings and all that stuff. So all that stuff had to be put in, and then the NAI stuff had to be done, and you just got to get everything. You have to get everything done, and it's just a lot of work. And building up to that, you're going to Sam's Club and getting all the snacks and all the waters, and that's for every team there. And you're making sure you've got the lane conditioned the exact way that you want it. There's just a lot that goes into it. And I was running back and forth between two bowling centers, trying to get everything done. Unfortunately, in both of those cases, I've got some great proprietors to work with Brian Strickland and Sarah Strickland at Summit, who bent over backwards for us, and everybody at Aaron's has always, bent over backwards for us. Mike and Bob have done everything we've ever asked, and more. And they've been a pleasure to work with for the last 3 years.
That's awesome. Talking about the actual, nuts and bolts of the event itself, again, it was our first opportunity to see your athletes at home this year, and they had some of their best performances of the season so far. Talking varsity, first of all, both varsity teams qualified for the elimination. There were 13 teams in both fields, so both teams made the top 8 for the bracket play on Sunday afternoon. Felt like a good weekend from my perspective. How do you feel the results turned out for your teams?
Oh, I thought they did great. We from an individual standpoint, our senior Bryce Stewart was he almost made the all-tournament team. I think he was 7th. Claire Bush had another top 10 on the women's side. I thought it was a really great showing for both teams. I mean, I think after Saturday, all 3 teams were in the top 5. So I have no complaints whatsoever. Once you get into the elimination matches, it's a whole different ball game. It's a whole different tournament, and where you qualify, obviously in a bracket, that's you're going to one Bulls 8 or whatever. And the women's team ran into a buzzsaw. They went crazy. They hadn't bowled that well all day until they bowled us.
No kidding.
And then the guys, I believe they bowled Oklahoma Christian.
Southern Naz first.
Southern Nazarene. So they were the runner-up, and
right.
that's a darn good team. And they're a first-year school too. And he went out. Mark Jeffries is their head coach, and he's an old friend of mine. And he went out and recruited just some crazy good players from the Washington State area, and he talked them into going to Oklahoma City.
No kidding.
And he's got a really good team. They've been in the top, I think, 15 in the country all year. So
they look really good.
They're good.
Yeah.
They're really good. Oklahoma Christian and those two schools are like right next to each other.
Are they really? Yeah.
And they're both really good. I thought we did really well. I cannot complain about how any of them did. And we, like I say every time I'm on the show, we've got a young team, and on both men's and women's, and they'd never been in match play before. So
sure.
a lot of them, especially on the women's side, but on the men's side, we've got a little bit of experience with match play over there. But it's you've never been. It's a whole different animal, and it goes by really fast. And if you get behind, you're done. So, and that's what happened when we run into a team that throws I think they went strike spare 6-bagger, and it was over. But and they were a little upset, and I told them they have nothing to be upset about. I was proud of every one of them. They did a great job, especially with as inexperienced as we are.
It's so fun obviously I don't want to say obviously because it's different for everybody, but I like the match play format because it simulates quote unquote other sports, and you can see the head-to-head score. The head-to-head score actually matters compared to the team scores over Saturday, where it doesn't really matter if you win or lose that head-to-head matchup because you're just building total pins. But it's fun to see the scores play out because I know the athletes are not really supposed to be doing it, but when you're standing in the back like we are, you're seeing all the scores roll in, if you'll pardon the choice of words, literally after every frame, and you can start doing a little bit of the math and thinking, all right, what do we need to do the rest of the way? If we hit this, do we have a shot? And it's really fun to see all of that, play out in real time because obviously that's not how it works for any other sport. We just had Coach Carp on earlier, and if you're batting in the 8th inning, the other team's going to come up and hit after that. So, every other team's got a chance in theory, and you're watching these two both scores roll out live as they go on, and it makes the drama's there, and I know that the intensity is there as an athlete and as a coach as well because you can literally see how it's going, and probably, if not in the back of your mind, in the front of your mind, that if I do or don't do this, then that might make or break my team's chances to win this game.
Yeah, I mean, what's funny is that most of them don't even look at the score.
Good, all right. That's good, right?
It is, but and what's unfortunate is because of automatic scoring. When I was a kid, you had to keep score by hand, and so I know what we need every frame. I know exactly what the score is. Well, they have no idea because they can't figure out what happens if they strike and get 9 and whatever. So, but I have it all figured out in my head, so I know. So, they're usually looking at me and they can tell by my facial expression what needs to happen here. So, it's a whole different ball game. But it's fun to watch, and it does get intense. It worked out in our favor last year. Right. And it didn't work out in our favor this year. So, and the two teams that won, I would say were the two best teams in the field. So, in the for Ottawa women, I think they're top in NAI. I know they're top 5, and in Oklahoma Christian men are I believe top 5 in USBC. So, the two teams that were supposed to win, that were favored to win, won. So it really wasn't a surprise to me.
Mathematically, it's not necessarily a surprise in an 8-team field that this might happen for both teams, but so maybe I'm reading into it more than I should be, but do you think it says anything that your teams, the teams that you guys lost to in the first round, were both the runners-up for that bracket, meaning they were both pretty darn good, or at least got hot down the stretch?
I would say, yeah, I'd say so. It's, especially on the guys' side. On the women's side, I think Baker's coach would tell you that that's not her best team. They just got hot at the right time, which is what happened to us last year.
Sure.
We were definitely not the favorites to win that tournament, and we just got hot at the right time, and that's what happens. It like I said, it goes by so quick, and you throw you throw 3 in a row on a tough condition, you can pretty much walk away with it. So it just matters getting the right hits at the right time.
One of the things that I was talking with about one of the athletes on both teams, and you can probably guess which athletes those might have been based on the question I'm going to ask, they were telling me about how important, emotion, momentum, if you believe in that, but just seeing how your teammates do in those types of formats, maybe less so the team style, but seeing, your teammate either strike or not in the frame before you will affect how you approach your next frame. And I was saying, in a perfect world, it shouldn't, because if you and I are the same team, it doesn't matter what I do before, you should be able to go down there and execute as well as you're going to regardless. But that's not the reality, because if everybody's struggling, that might affect you. If everybody's rolling well, if you're, bowling 4th or 5th, that might affect you the other way. So how true do you think that is, and did that really manifest for the teams this weekend, do you think?
I think to some extent, in a perfect world, it shouldn't matter.
Right.
But it does, and the like I tell them every time we go to a tournament, we don't care what's on the other side of the ball return. So we don't care what the team is doing that we're crossing with or bowling against, and we're trying to pay attention to what we're doing. And yeah, sometimes an open frame in a certain position, yeah, it can affect you and it can affect what we're doing. But then again, I've got some players that, if somebody's struggling, actually most of them, if somebody's struggling, they're going to pick them up and they're going to, make their best shot. You don't see it very often where, all of a sudden the shoulders start shrugging and stuff like that when somebody opens. We try not to do that. And I'm a big believer in body language. And so I'm always on them about body language and how to carry yourself, and we, let it go. We don't care what happened that last frame. So I think it does build momentum. If somebody strikes and you get another one behind it, it really does carry over and can pump you up.
Is that so? You said that the strategy, the game plan is we're not looking at what the other team is doing. We're trying to kind of put up a metaphorical wall there. We're not even watching what they're doing. It's so interesting to me, because it's not that I don't believe that. I think that's extremely important. But watching the game 2 for that elimination game about 24 hours ago on Sunday afternoon for both teams did objectively very well. And, I mean, on the men's side especially, I was watching them, they were literally toe-to-toe with Southern Nazarene in game 2. It was the exact same score through 5 frames. Exact same thing happened. Now, it was, a 7 spare versus an 8 spare or whatever, but mathematically it was the exact same thing through 5. And then the 6th frame was when we left one open and they cleaned it, and then that was really
a momentum changer right there.
Exactly. And you could kind of see that mathematically, yeah, emotionally a little bit, but the rest of the team was able to kind of on our side was able to kind of rebound and finish with a score over 200, so objectively a really good day, but they couldn't have done a whole lot better. But it was tough watching what the other team was doing, because, and this is how I felt about Baker in game 2 on the women's side, is there was not much more that they were going to be able to do. They shot extremely well, and it must have been kind of demoralizing at some point, because it's like our teams were doing about as well as you might imagine, but they were literally doing excellently. So what can you do?
There's no defense in bowling.
Right.
So there is nothing you can do. It's going to happen. It's going to happen to everybody. It's going to happen to every team. It's how you handle it. And we had a couple players, especially on the girls' side, that were very upset. Now they're new, they're freshmen, they didn't know what to really think. But my upperclassmen, they knew, and especially I'll just say Claire. She's been in that position before, and Kirsten's been in that position before, and she knew, what are you going to do? You can't do anything about that. You can't throw it for them, and you can't, So they handled it. My upperclassmen handled it really well. I had some upset freshmen, but I huddled them all up and I said, look, sometimes you're the windshield and sometimes you're the bug. That's that's what happens in this sport, and it happens in every sport. Blind squirrel in the acorn. It happens. So what are you going to do? And even on the guys' side, with them, I mean the guys are so competitive with themselves, with with everything, and it's just going to happen. Sometimes you're just going to run into a buzzsaw, and there's not anything you can do about it.
Big challenge coming up this weekend as well. Something you were telling me before we went on air. It's kind of a unique approach, or unique format, I should say. Fortunately, first of all, for you don't have to travel very far. It's only over in Lawrence. So one of your shortest trips of the year, which, first of all, good, no kidding. But then once you actually get there, it's a bit of a different setup than this past weekend was, and really just about any event that you guys have been to this year or you've ever been to. So what can you tell us about what you're getting into this weekend?
Well, it's a 2-day event, but they're 2 separate tournaments. So on Saturday, we're bowling 5 team games and then 12 games of Baker. So it comes out to a total of 7.5 games or something like that. But it's a long day because each team game and each Baker set takes about an hour. So you're looking at a 7-hour day,
Sure.
And it will run over. It always does. So you're looking at about 8.5 hours. The next day, and then at the end of that, then they cut to the top 8 for match play. So it could get, you could be in Lawrence until 7-8 o'clock that night. So it's a long day, and then the next day it's just 7 games of team. But it's you got to think it's an hour each game, so you're looking 7-8 hours of it's just going to be a long weekend. It's going to be a grueling weekend. It's going to be, there's a lot of teams there. It's all NAIA. They're running 3 different NAIA tournaments, regional tournaments throughout the country. So almost every NAIA program will be in play this weekend.
It's not a required thing necessarily, but it's. I mean, how is it built? Because you said there's 3 different pods across the country, and you were telling me this is the furthest west that the country is hosting. So that means this is really the best opportunity for just about a large portion of the NAIA bowling programs in the country to compete this weekend will be at this event right here.
Yes. Well, there'll be over 30, 35 teams there, and that's at probably each of those regionals. Well, there'll be 30 or 35 teams, so you're looking at 90-some teams in play on one weekend. So it's it's a big thing for rankings and strength of field and all that stuff. So it's cool, and we're going to try and run these every year to get NAIA more involved. Not that they're not involved, but to make more NAIA exclusive tournaments.
Cool.
And that's our goal for the NAIA.
We won't run into Southern Nazarene again, is what you're saying.
No, not this week.
might run into Ottawa and Baker again.
We will definitely see Ottawa and Baker. Those are right in their
That's right
in their backyard. So they'll be there for sure. St. Mary's will be there. Hastings College will be there. Midland. There's going to be a lot of schools there.
What is, as you only have a handful of competitions left this regular season now that you've got through the Eagle Invitational this year. So, I mean, what are your expectations and hopes for your teams the rest of the year?
I think we're going to be, middle of the pack this next weekend. If we have a really good weekend, we got a chance of making the top 8. The guys are bowling really well right now. The girls, we just need some experience, and we're very, very short as far as my bench. So we if someone gets hurt or gets sick or whatever, we're in trouble. But because I think I'm down to 6. for the weekend, which is, I hate going in with only that few of a roster. But and then after that, the guys are done with their regular season after this weekend, and then the girls are going to the Hoosier, which is a gigantic tournament in Indianapolis, and we're going to hit that, and that one's going to be interesting because that's a very, very strong field, and all the big teams are there.
Really?
Because everybody's chasing their points and their rankings. That's the last one that you get double points for. So, the big teams of Wichita State will be there, Jackson State, the number, I think the top 10 schools in the country will be there. So that will be great, and it's good for us to get that experience. And it's such a hard tournament to get into that, once we get in, and the guys, unfortunately, are still on the waiting list for that tournament. Really? It's going to be another couple of years before we get in, before I get the guys into it. But the girls fortunately got in this year, so we were going no matter what, and that once you're in, you stay in.
Okay, and so you elect to leave or something?
Right. So I'm always going to take them there, and once I get the guys in there, we will always go to the Hoosier.
Is it it's that big of a deal?
Yeah, well, it's if you're borderline, if you're having a rough year or whatever, and you're borderline, and you need those points, you have to go. You have to, because you got to chase those points. Yeah, that's it. You don't make it there, you're not going to postseason.
Sure. And this is just an outside baseball question, if you will, pardon the choice of words. I'm just thinking, in the big picture, a team will need to do well at a tournament like that to get those points to even get into postseason consideration, qualification for USBC events, correct?
Correct.
So then that is, like you said, that is literally the last chance to get those points, and hopefully for a team make up the difference. Otherwise, you're going to be left out of that qualification process.
Right, you're going to be out of the. If you're borderline, if you're like right now, I think the girls are 95th in the country or something like that. To make it to the ITCs, the USBC postseason, you have to be in the top 80.
Okay.
Top 80 men, top 80 women. So if you're in the 70s, or I'm sorry, if you're in the say you're 85th, 89th, something like that. If you're not in the Hoosier and you don't place, somewhere up, not, I wouldn't say at the very top, but somewhere in the middle, you're not going to postseason. So, and once you get to the ITC regionals, sectionals, it's anybody's ball game. If you finish in the top 4, you go to nationals. So it all changes. It's a whole, the whole season starts over again. For you, if you have a great week at sectionals, you got a chance.
It's challenging then that if that is such an important tournament for a large number of teams, it's difficult that there's a waiting list to get in there, because that means some people are just not going to be in just kind of by lack of luck of the draw.
Oh yeah. I'll give you a perfect example. St. Mary's men's has had I wouldn't say a great year, but they've had a fairly decent year, and they are borderline in the top 80. Well, they couldn't get they're as young as we are, so they couldn't get in, and it may cost them. Wow. So and that's unfortunate for those kids. Their coach, he knows what's going on, and he's okay with it, but it's it's still, if you can't get in, you can't get those points.
It's just so interesting that might be, it's not a gatekeeping necessarily, it's not done on purpose, but it is.
It's just the way kind of the schedule falls, if you've had a rough season at the other tier ones and you're chasing those points, that's it. If you're not in, you're not in.
I guess then the comeback that I would hear from a lot of folks is, well, make sure you do better at those previous events, and then we're not even having this conversation because you wouldn't be needing to chase those points. You've already got enough banked.
Exactly.
But easier said than done, right?
Right. The good teams go there because it's a coup to win.
Sure.
The Hoosier, to win any tier 1, it's a big deal, and that's why they go. It's not like Wichita State needs the points.
Right.
So they go because they want the win. That's why, and they want the experience because it's always on a much, much tougher condition.
And so you can scheme that for that event, knowing that it's hard. There's going to be a lot of really good teams. It means a lot to a lot of people, so might as well make it really challenging and make it even harder for a team to get out of it.
Yep.
That's so interesting. I love that is part of the scheme for your sport. You're not gonna.
Yeah, we don't want them easy.
Oh, and
you don't want to give them away.
We joked that there was a little bit of precipitation in the gym on Saturday that was near the visiting bench, and the coaches said, "Well, it's a little bit wet over here." I said, "We didn't do it on purpose. So it's not like we set those basketball conditions to make it harder for the visiting team.
Well,
and it's not like there's one visiting team here, right? So you're not scheming it against one team, but you as the host event, and what we just talked about for the Eagle Invite, you guys get to set those conditions to be whatever you think it should be, or whatever you want it to be."
What you're supposed to do, and this is what we do, is I let Mike Soroka pick the condition.
Sure.
I don't know what the condition is. I don't think it's right that the home team knows it's okay to have that home team knowledge, but it's one thing to go out and practice on it and really figure it out before anybody has a chance to bowl on it. So I try and keep it. Now I don't know if everybody does it, but that's just the way I do it. Is try and keep it as fair as possible. I'm all about fair.
I should have made sure that I made that clear because I think that is important. That is a critical distinction that I did not make clear. I should have said, when we're talking about the Hoosier, the house gets to decide that.
Right.
So that doesn't necessarily mean, in your case, that the home team is part of that determination process, or that you get that insider knowledge a day or a week before the bowling center goes out there and literally has to apply it to all the lanes. So I did not do a good job of making that distinction, but I guess I was more just saying that somebody gets to determine how easy or how hard it would, in theory, be for everybody that's going to be in there for the course of the weekend. And that is not something that takes us out of the whole, it was wet a little bit, and maybe Fieldhouse on Saturday, that was if we were playing in a neutral site and it was wet on one bench. We had nothing to do with it. It's a neutral site. But you don't see that anywhere else, is my point.
Right, and it's always important that we bowl on harder conditions, and we always do. Even those so-called easier conditions are still plenty hard.
Really?
I'll tell you right now, what college kids bowl on is harder than what professionals bowl on most of the time. Yeah, it's I think, in my opinion, college bowling goes almost to the extreme. There's some bowlers that we have on our teams that I know are better than what they're averaging in college, and that's because the lanes are so hard. And that's done on purpose. It's done to kind of even out the fields. But the really good bowlers they figure it out, and that's with any sport. They figure it out, and that's how they get better.
They can rise above it,
right? Sure.
And that's how they really stand out and maybe become professionals afterwards, where it might be not easier in terms of level of competition because you're going against other professionals, but in terms of conditions, you might start to see things that are a little bit easier or at least more straightforward than you have in the past. That's really interesting.
And there's always going to be one. There's always one guy or one gal that is going to average 230. It always happens. Somebody figures them out. I tell the kids, you walk into a bowling center, you walk into any tournament, there's a safe down at the end, and your job is to figure out the combination of that safe. And that's what you do, and somebody always figures it out. It may not be you, may not be me, but somebody always figures it out.
Somebody in that building.
Yeah, somebody's going to figure it out. Somebody's going to make them look easy. They may not be easy, but somebody's going to make them look easy.
That is awesome. I've never seen that. I've never even heard that from you before. That's really, really cool. We'll see if you can unlock those combinations over your last final regular season. Competitions of the year. A couple of weeks, the Eagle women will be heading to Indianapolis for the Hoosier Classic, the last big event of the year. But before that, this coming weekend in Lawrence, two different sets of tournaments run by the NAIA and a big NAIA regional event. That is this Saturday and Sunday in Lawrence, Kansas, not too far from here. You'll see some coverage of that from us on our social media channels. And as always, you can tune in to watch the teams live on the Avila Bowling Facebook pages. Thank you for being here so soon after your tournament. Congratulations on another successful home event. It was a lot of fun to be a part of, so congratulations.
Thank you, Tim.
That is head bowling coach Paul Wolf. For all of us here at Avila Athletics, thank you as always to Tanners at Redbridge for hosting us, so thank you to them. Thank you to executive producer Darian Miner. For all of them, I've been Tim Hackett. We will see you next week, Monday at 11:30 a.m. right here on the Avila Sports Network for the next episode of Eye on the Eagles. Until then, so long from Kansas City.